I know Maryland has been a terrific place for the growth of mediation, Maryland generally. Now, I also know I may get dinged for this if I'm speaking out of turn. There are people here who could ding me for it. But not everything that goes on in Maryland under the name of mediation is the same. And I think there's been a fair amount of controversy in Maryland about different approaches to mediation. So I'm going to be just very black and white about this in terms of oversimplifying, okay? So in my view, there's basically two options if you're going to offer your services to people as a mediator. One of them is what Dan called the directive approach, and one of them is what we call the supportive or transformative approach, or client-directed approach. And my strong belief is you can't do both at the same time. You got to choose one or the other. You are either solving problems for people, or you are supporting people as they solve their problems, think about them, communicate about them, and work their way through it. Those are the two things you can do. I don't think you could do both of them. I don't think they have the same value. That's sort of inherent in my remarks before. I think in Maryland, as almost everywhere else in the country, now you tell me if I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, what do they say? If I'm lying, I'm dying. Not, God forbid. I don't think I'm wrong. In Maryland, as everywhere else, the client-directed approach to mediation is a minority approach. A minority approach. It is not the dominant approach to mediation. By the way, that's true in every other profession as well, which I've studied. It's true in lawyering, in medicine, in counseling, everywhere, in teaching. Everything is top-down in this culture because we live in a top-down culture. Transformative mediation is a bottom-up process. So that's one part of an answer to your question, Dustin, that to get people to realize the value of what you do, they have to see it. And it may be that most of what they see in Maryland, as in every other place, when they see mediation, is not what Dan is calling mediation in this session, and what I am calling mediation in the work that I do and that I encourage others to do. It is top-down directive mediation. It is not bottom-up supportive mediation. So you're never going to get people to understand what you do when they don't actually even see it. So if you want to know what you have to do, you have to mobilize in Maryland. Why shouldn't I make a little trouble here? You have to mobilize in Maryland to build more interest within Maryland, within macro, within whatever it is, in this kind of approach to mediation, where we support and never supplant client decision-making, where we support and never force inter-party, inter-client recognition. That's the first thing you have to do. You have to support that, because that's what'll make a difference, in my view, not the other stuff. And the other stuff tends to dominate for all kinds of reasons. The second thing you have to do is you have to do what I did with this article that I just, thank God, got published. You have to talk about this everywhere, to every kind of an audience that you can, as eloquently as you can, as passionately as you can, and engage people in thinking about, do you really want to continue living in a society that is always telling you what to do, instead of helping you to find what it is that you want to do and how to do it? Every one of you belongs to organizations, and whether it's churches or synagogues or civic groups, whoever, or within your companies or your agencies. You can give a talk at lunchtime or in an evening. Every one of us can. I'm here on a Sunday. I don't have to do this. Why am I doing this? I'm doing this for the same reason that I would like you to do this in every venue that you possibly can, if you agree with me about all this. That's the second piece. But then, in other words, you use your platform to put it out there. Here, this is what we have here, this beautiful process called mediation, client directive, client supportive. Look at this. Isn't this a jewel? Wouldn't this make a difference in our society? And then you couple that back with the first thing, Dustin, which is now that you have to have some place to send those people where they can actually see that being used. And it can't just be Vicky and Dusty and John. It has to be all over the state, because a lot of people are not going to drive to Southern Maryland from wherever else. You can do those things. Yeah, but you probably could do them better than I can. Anyway, so.
All right, thank you. That's good.
That is a window into your question.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I had a similar follow-up question to Dustin, because I had an opportunity last night to talk to a few of my neighbors, two of whom are in like real battle. We had sort of an outdoor barbecue by the fire pit. It's actually pretty warm, unseasonably warm here in Maryland, so we're outside. And they knew I was going through this training, and I said, why don't you guys do mediation with, I'll call them the Smiths, your next door neighbors, and kind of, help resolve some of these issues that you're always complaining about. And they said things like, they'll never be able to do it. It's not worth our time. We're not going to talk about it. I almost felt like they were getting some benefit out of having this conflict with their next door neighbors. And so I don't know that it's that they have experience with a particular mediation method and didn't think it worked. I think they are fearful of talking, fearful of bringing somebody in, fearful of where it just seems like it's more of a human nature thing. Like, I'm just not going to involve anybody else. It's just easier to just ignore it and move on. And I wonder what your thoughts were there, because I think there are so many opportunities. There's so much potential for mediation in our county. These are people who are here a long time. I don't think they, sort of have come from other parts and know other ways. And how do we help them understand what it's like and get over maybe some of those fears of just talking?
That's a great question. Well, a couple of things occur to me, Marissa. Thank you for that question. One is that you don't need a mediator to do this. In other words, one thing that you personally might do, since you know all these folks, is to say, hey, I've been learning some really interesting stuff about what's going on in conflict and how to handle it better. Let me just talk some of this through with you about how you might handle it. So you become, in a certain way, and I know that probably Dan, Vicky, Dusty, John all do this, as well as serving as quote unquote mediators. You become kind of a coach, not a mediator, a coach. And you talk with them about, forget about bringing somebody in. How can you do this in a way that would make things better for you? Now, if you don't want to, that's the other piece of this, Marissa. We don't believe in dragging the horse to water and making him drink. That's called waterboarding, right? We don't believe in shoving the clients into the room and making them talk to each other. So if people don't want to engage, supporting their desire not to engage is another way of supporting agency and choice and strength. Saying that's okay. I understand. That makes perfect sense. And by the way, you have no idea, none of us does, in terms of anybody's life. This is like the people who went overseas to become big mediation experts in Eastern Europe and to tell them how to solve all their problems over there, right? And then they encountered people who basically were saying, I don't want to sit down with those other people. I don't even want to see their faces. Mm-hmm. And I certainly don't want to make any kind of agreements with them. And what do you mean? Why not? And this and that and the other thing. I don't want to because they slaughtered my family. I don't want to because, any number of reasons which, I didn't know that. We don't know a lot about the lives of the people that we think maybe we could help, right? So when people say no, that's what I mean by living with no. Being a helper in conflict in a way that's really helpful means taking no for an answer. So if they don't want help, good. no problem. But even hearing about why they don't want help, letting people talk about it, letting people express their frustration with whatever has happened in the past. You may find a number of opportunities to comment on that in ways that could give them help. And by the way, even if you didn't comment on it as an expert, oh, well, I have this device, this tool and that tool. I don't believe in tools, right? I believe in listening and reflecting. So if you just sit there and reflect what they're saying, that will help them. You've been doing this in this session, right? You've been practicing this thing we call reflection. If that's all you do for those neighbors, they will become stronger and clearer by sitting with you and going through that. They will gain clarity about why they don't want to do X, do want to do Y, what is it they want to do, how they might do it differently. That will emerge organically from that kind of non-directive, supportive, bottom-up process of listening and reflecting. And then you never know what's going to happen. And you're not looking for an outcome. You're not successful if you get them, quote unquote, to talk to each other, and you're not failing if you don't. And in any event, we never get people to do anything. That's not what we don't even want to get people to do things. We want people to choose to do things. And all we want to do is to help and support them as they're making those choices. So if you think about that concretely in your situation, then maybe that's something you can do. And you don't have to do it with both sides together. You could do it with whoever wants to talk to you. And whoever doesn't, doesn't. We have a colleague who wrote about this, using this kind of process in the Balkans after the war between Bosnia and Serbia. And he called his process, what was the name of the article?
Transformative dialogue? No.
Yeah, but the first
who needs
article.
to talk to whom about what?
Who wants to talk to whom about what and when? So all this guy did was he used to go out and hang out in coffee houses in Bosnia or in Serbia and have 100 cups of coffee with people. And every time he would be asking them, who needs to talk about what with whom? And eventually, what do you know? People defined for themselves who they wanted to talk with, about what, and with whom. What they wanted to talk about, with whom, and when. We can do that right here in our own communities. Some of our colleagues are already doing that and sort of taking notes and making projects about it, but it doesn't have to be done as a project. You don't need, a grant to do it. Is that helpful?
That's really helpful. I'm actually sitting here thinking I had just reflected what they were saying instead of trying to persuade them to go to mediation. I would have been much more successful. So I got to make that shift in my mind. Thank you.
Right. Looks like Malcolm has a question. I'm taking up too much of your time here. It's up to you to shut me up.
It's up to you to leave when you need to, Baruch. I'm not going to kick you out.
It's always good. It's always good to sit at the feet of a guru and knowledgeable person. I appreciate what you're saying, and I hear what you're saying, and I understand it. But I also look at what's taking place in society today, where people don't want to hear anyone helping them. They only want to hear what reinforces what they already believe. And sometimes in doing this, they don't actually hear the other person talking. And we see this reflected in our society today. And this is why we have such division among generations, such division among races, and such division in politics. It's because people will not sit down and be willing to talk. And that's why, and I may be wrong, find it difficult a lot of times to get people to help themselves. And that's what I see this transformative mediation type of thing is that we don't direct, but person is supposed to sort of inter-reflect and look within themselves and see where they need to, not necessarily need to, but see where they can change.
So here's a comment on what you say, Malcolm. First, you're 100% right.
And I guess my question is,
Okay.
it's an uphill battle, and I think it's worth it for us to continue to do this. But what do you think about that?
Well, I agree 1,000, maybe 1,000,000% that it's an uphill battle. It's countercultural in the most literal
I'm not
sense.
hearing you for some reason.
Now, okay, you hearing me now? Nope.
You froze
We all
on
hear
us
you.
too, Malcolm. I think
Yeah.
your connection must be hurting. Oh, now I see you nodding.
Can you hear now, Malcolm? Yes? Okay. So look, how could I disagree with anything you said? This is just the facts. And when you can't hear me, if you can't hear me, put up a hand or something, okay? All right, good. So as far as being an uphill battle, this little, project of the transformative approach to mediation has been an uphill battle since we started it back in the late 1980s. Always been an uphill battle. Will it succeed or not? I guess the answer to that is, I don't know. But why would I not want to do it anyway? Because if I don't, and I just accept things the way they are, that stinks. That's, then I'm condemned to have a society that doesn't have the kind of value that I think society really has. It's an existential choice. It may or may not work, but not to try doing this, that's a totally self-defeating strategy, right? So having said that, so I'm going to keep climbing up the hill. But what about the fact that there are these, it's like the expression in some fields is stovepipes, right? Or bubbles. Today they have some word for this in the media. Everybody listens to, echo chamber. That's it, the echo chamber. They listen to their own echo chambers. They never hear anybody outside. And often they don't even know that there's anybody out there who thinks anything different than they do, right? How do you change that? So, and again, somewhere in what you said, Malcolm, I heard the word "get them to" creep into what you said. You have to get rid of get rid of that phrase. You're not going to get anybody to do anything. However, what you can do is you can realize that in these little bubbles on each side, I guarantee you there are people in those bubbles, in those echo chambers, on both or all sides, who are not totally comfortable in them, who are saying to themselves, this can't be all there is. Must be somebody who has something else to say. Those people are the place you start. Those people at the fringes, the outliers in each echo chamber, are already sort of interested in moving outside of their comfort zone, of their echo chamber. And if there were a place to go where they could safely sit down with somebody who doesn't see things the way they do, they sort of have a desire, a sort of a thrill at the idea of, what if I sat down with somebody who thinks the exact opposite of me? What would happen then? But I'm afraid to do it, okay? I can understand why. But if there were such a place, I'd be willing to go and try it. And then if somehow we can provide that kind of a place, invite people into that kind of a place, help them to sit in that kind of a place, that's where these things can happen. Let me back up a step from that. The way those people the outliers, identify themselves. And this is actually one of the steps mentioned in that article that Dan just sent you. It's always a very bad idea. This goes back to what you were saying, Marissa, in my comment to you. It's a bad idea to bring people together too soon, too quickly. Nobody wants to be put in an uncomfortable situation when they're still unsure of themselves. People need to have an opportunity to become clear about what it is that they think and what they might want to say to somebody else before they have to sit down and face them and start talking. That actually happens in mediation, not in a sequential way always, but that's the role, that's the purpose, that's the effect of reflection with each party. It's as though almost they were in two separate rooms and not having to confront each other. That's what reflection does at the same time when people are in the same room, but you don't have to have them in the same room or even at the same time. So Marissa, you could in fact go through this process with one of those couples and then with the other at a totally different time. What happens when the people who are in a single echo chamber sit together in that echo chamber and they talk to each other in the echo chamber? I guarantee you, someone sitting there and hearing everybody else in the echo chamber is going to say to themselves something like, well, I don't really think that's true. I don't think what was just said is really true about what those other people think. I think that's probably overstated. I think there's probably not a good basis for that. In other words, they're going to start having their own thoughts about what might be different. They're going to start discovering that they don't want to just live in that echo chamber. So that allowing people in each echo chamber or on each side of a conflict, if you want to put it that way, to talk amongst themselves is that some of those people are going to develop, not that you get them to do it, Malcolm, some of those people are going to develop on their own an interest, a desire to hear from other folks outside the echo chamber. And they're going to start thinking about that. And they're going to get less and less interested in hearing more of the same old, and more interested in hearing something new, even if it's challenging. And then there's an opportunity. Then there's a chance for people to come and sit, and check each other out. And it ain't going to be easy. And it's going to be, people circling like wolves, meeting a new pack for the first time. But they're going to be in a new room. They're going to be in a room with people different than them. And then, if they are helped to do it, they can continue that conversation. It's a brand new conversation now. So listening to yourself, that's what reflection is about in the first instance. Helping people to listen to themselves, they will discover their own doubts, their own opennesses, and begin thinking, well, you know what, I'd really like to hear what Malcolm has to say about this. Instead of hearing Dan tell me what Malcolm probably thinks about this. Why the hell should I listen to Dan? I could actually listen to Malcolm. I think that's the way this happens. That may all be pie in the sky, Malcolm, right? Like the uphill road. But I think this possibility that that's what opens up the cracks in the echo chambers.
Hey, we don't
allows people to venture out. In other words, come back and summarize, people have to begin by listening to themselves. And if you want to help people, the first thing to do is to help them with listening to themselves in the echo chambers. Help people talk. And in those echo chambers, there will be dissenting voices. There will be outlier voices. And if you're good at doing this, then your reflections of their voices will give them more strength to leave and find other people to talk to. And it may even affect the other people in the echo chamber so that they start asking questions too. We don't need to rush to push the Democrats and Republicans, the white people and the black people, the religious people and the non-religious people. We don't need to rush to push them to talk together. That's a bad idea and is never going to work. But if we help the people on each side separately talk to each other, there will emerge an interest in moving beyond those narrow confines. If it doesn't, at least we tried.